Have you ever looked back at a major historical event and just thought, why? Why did it have to happen that way? The 1991 Gulf War is one of those moments. The outcome seemed almost inevitable. A massive, technologically superior coalition led by the United States against Iraq. So why didn't Saddam Hussein just back down? Why did he lead his country into a conflict that would prove so devastating? It's a question that has puzzled historians and analysts for decades. The answer isn't simple. It's a complex web of psychology, regional politics, miscalculation, and a leader's iron grip on his own version of reality. Let's unravel this story together. To truly understand Saddam's mindset in 1990, we have to rewind a bit to the Iran-Iraq War. This was an 8-year-long, brutal conflict that ended in 1988. From Saddam's perspective, he had single-handedly stopped the spread of Ayatollah Khomeini's Islamic Revolution across the Arab world. He saw himself not just as the leader of Iraq, but as the defender of the entire Sunni Arab order. This war cost Iraq dearly. Hundreds of thousands of lives and a national debt that was absolutely staggering. Somewhere around $80 billion. A huge chunk of that debt was owed to his wealthy neighbors, Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. Now imagine you see yourself as a hero, the savior of the Arab world, and you're broke. You look next door and you see Kuwait, a tiny nation literally swimming in oil wealth. To make matters worse, Saddam accused Kuwait of two things. First, he claimed they were overproducing oil, which drove down the price per barrel and crippled Iraq's ability to recover economically. Second, and this was a major point of contention, he accused Kuwait of slant drilling, essentially siphoning oil from the Rumaila oil field, which straddled the Iraq-Kuwait border. From Saddam's point of view, Kuwait wasn't just being ungrateful for his sacrifice in the war against Iran, they were actively stealing from him and sabotaging his economy. This sense of betrayal and injustice was a powerful motivator. On top of the economic grievances, there was a deep-seated historical claim. For years, Iraqi nationalists, including Saddam, had argued that Kuwait was historically part of Iraq. They viewed Kuwait's existence as an artificial creation of British colonial mapmakers, designed to keep Iraq away from the Persian Gulf. In Saddam's mind, retaking Kuwait wasn't an invasion of a sovereign nation. It was the reunification of a lost province. It was about righting a historical wrong and restoring Iraq to its natural geographic and economic strength. Combining this nationalistic ambition with the crushing debt and the feeling of being cheated, the invasion of Kuwait started to look less like a gamble and more like a necessary, even righteous, act. Now let's talk about the signals, or rather the mixed signals. In the lead up to the invasion, Saddam had a now famous meeting with the US ambassador to Iraq, April Glaspie. The exact transcript is debated, but the general takeaway for Saddam was that the United States was not particularly interested in Arab-on-Arab disputes. When Glaspie reportedly told him, "We have no opinion on the Arab-Arab conflicts, like your border disagreement with Kuwait," Saddam likely heard a green light. He interpreted this not as a standard diplomatic statement, but as tacit permission. He believed the US was so focused on its Cold War rivalries and so dependent on Arab oil that it would ultimately look the other way. This was a catastrophic misreading of American politics and resolve. He failed to understand that the post-Cold War world had different rules, and that the principle of national sovereignty was one the US would not allow to be trampled so blatantly. So on August 2nd, 1990, Iraqi forces rolled into Kuwait. The world was stunned. The United Nations Security Council immediately condemned the invasion and imposed crippling economic sanctions. But Saddam didn't flinch. Why? Because he was playing a different game. He believed he held all the cards. He thought the international coalition being assembled by the US was a bluff. He looked at America's experience in Vietnam and assumed they had no appetite for a major ground war with heavy casualties. He believed his own military, battle-hardened from the war with Iran, and one of the largest in the world at the time, could inflict enough pain to make the coalition back down. He famously called the impending conflict the mother of all battles, promising to turn the sands of Arabia into a graveyard for American soldiers. Furthermore, Saddam tried to reframe the entire conflict. He wasn't just a dictator who had invaded a smaller neighbor, he was a pan-Arab leader standing up to Western imperialism. He tried to link his withdrawal from Kuwait to the withdrawal of Israeli forces from occupied Palestinian territories. This was a shrewd move designed to win support on the Arab street and fracture the coalition, which included several Arab nations like Saudi Arabia and Egypt. He hoped to ignite popular uprisings in those countries, forcing their leaders to abandon the American-led alliance. For a moment, it seemed like a potent strategy, tapping into deep-seated frustrations across the Middle East. But the governments of the Arab coalition partners held firm, their fear of a dominant, aggressive Iraq outweighing any sympathy for Saddam's posturing. Another crucial factor was the information bubble Saddam had built around himself. In a totalitarian state like Ba'athist Iraq, no one dares to bring the leader bad news. His generals, his ministers, his advisors, they all told him what he wanted to hear. They told him the army's morale was high, that his equipment was superior, and that the will of the Iraqi people was unbreakable. He was surrounded by sycophants who reinforced his own delusions of grandeur and his miscalculations about the enemy. He received intelligence reports that confirmed his biases and dismissed any that contradicted them. He was genuinely convinced that his strategy would work, that the coalition would either fracture or sue for peace after a brief bloody struggle. He was living in an echo chamber of his own making, completely detached from the reality of the military and diplomatic situation. As the UN deadline of January 15, 1991 approached, frantic, last-minute diplomatic efforts were made. But Saddam wouldn't budge. For him, backing down at this point would have been a complete and total humiliation. He had staked his entire reputation, his image as the strongman of the Arab world, on this gamble. A retreat from Kuwait without any concessions would have shattered his authority, not just internationally, but more importantly at home. Dictators like Saddam rule through a projection of invincible strength. Showing weakness could be a death sentence, inviting coups and rebellions. So, he was trapped. His own ego, and the political system he had created, made it impossible for him to choose the peaceful, rational path. It was better, in his mind, to go down fighting and maintain the myth of the defiant warrior than to surrender and be seen as a coward. And so, on January 17, 1991, Operation Desert Storm began. The coalition's air campaign was overwhelmingly effective, dismantling Iraq's command and control, air defenses, and military infrastructure in a matter of weeks. The mother of all battles on the ground, when it finally came, lasted only 100 hours. The Iraqi army, which Saddam had believed to be invincible, collapsed with stunning speed. It was a complete and utter military disaster for Iraq. Looking back, Saddam's decision seems almost insane, but it was a madness with a method. It was born from a potent cocktail of personal ego, a sense of historical and economic grievance, a catastrophic misreading of international politics, and the isolation of absolute power. He saw himself as a grand historical figure, a modern-day Nebuchadnezzar or Saladin, destined to restore Arab glory. He wasn't just fighting for Kuwait. He was fighting for his vision of the world and his place in it. Unfortunately for him and for the people of Iraq, that vision was a dangerous illusion. The story of Saddam's fateful decision is a powerful lesson in how the psychology of a single leader, insulated from reality, can lead a nation down a path to ruin. Thanks so much for watching. It's a complex piece of history, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think was the biggest factor in his decision? If you found this interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that shaped our world. See you next time.